Welcome back to Catapult Your Business, where we help catapult businesses one question at a time. I am super excited to be here and talking with Alex, one of our talented business advisors. I'll get to Alex here in just a moment. He brought a really awesome question today. We're going to talk today about what does it mean to run your business with a data mentality? Why does data come first in decision making? Why must you run a data-first mentality as a business owner if you want to scale and see success? We're going to unpack that and so much more, and we're so glad you're along for the journey and joining us. But before we get into that question, let me introduce you to one of our talented business advisors who's now been with us for a little while and making a major impact with a bunch of businesses that we are fortunate enough to partner with every day. Alex, welcome to the call. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to talk about this.
Well, I know it's a topic near and dear to your heart, even just from going to school, at University of Chicago and getting into economics. I know this is just in your blood and in your DNA. What makes you so passionate about data? Let's just start with you personally on that note.
Oh, I am passionate about data, partially due to my training, but more importantly, I view data as a check against contextual and emotional biases in the human brain. Human brain is wired to seek patterns and create context. Sometimes that's incredibly useful. Gut judgments, decisions, experiential background. Sometimes, however, that can lead us astray. Data is the tether back to reality to let us know, hey, are we on the right track with this contextual mapping? Are we on the right track with our mental model? Are we just running down a path of bias and rumination? It gives validation to everything.
In a more simple way, are a bunch of business owners just kind of walking around lost and don't actually fully know the reality of their situation because they're not in tune with their data? I think we both know that answer is yes. So if people are listening in and feeling that you're lost as an entrepreneur, you don't fully know where you stand, you may not have data fully bridged into your business the way you should, or how others have figured out how to bridge data into the business to run. So I love that perspective. Alex, jump right to this for me. Why does data matter? I understand why you're passionate about it. I understand what can happen if not, but I think some people are like, the subjectivity, I have good gut instincts. What's your push to that? Why does data have to be at the forefront for a business owner at all times?
What we do, as you well know, is we help catapult businesses forward. We help them scale. We help create and multiply enterprise value. The most important word you just posed there is subjectivity. Subjectivity isn't scalable. Subjectivity is barely communicable, but data is scalable. Data allows us to make systems. Data allows us to train others to be competent, more competent than we are as business owners. That allows us to truly level up the scale, the scope, and the long-term vision of the business.
I love that comment of not only does it limit scalability, I think the really big part I just heard actually was the ability to communicate is almost impossible if you don't have something objective to balance against. And that shows up in leadership, that shows up in decision making, that shows up into your customers of intruding into a market. All of that is taken into account. And if you don't have data to lean against and show and put into a box per se, how the heck can you create scale? How the heck can you communicate it? I love it. And I guess what else comes to mind? Where do you seen when you've worked with clients where they really struggle with getting into this data mindset? What holds them back? What are some of those common things you hear? I can think of a few in my head, but what do you find where people come in as this is what's holding me back from using data more often?
The number one thing that I come across is time. We partner with subject matter experts who oftentimes are neck deep in producing whatever their company is producing. And they're probably really good at it. But when I ask folks what their method is, or what 2 people could do in the business instead of 1, or what 10 people could do in the business instead of 2, that's when the data conversation starts to happen, because the answer is, I don't know. And then my follow-up question normally is, What would it take, subject matter expert business owner, what would it take to make another one of you? What would it take to make 5 more of you? And we start to get into what is that? What can you deliver on a day-to-day basis? What can you do in a work week? Whatever you're producing, service hours, widgets, etc. How are we defining success? And if it is subjective, you're going to have a heck of a time recruiting, hiring, and training people to help you carry out your vision.
I totally agree with that perspective. Another thing I've also seen, Alex, is that fear. Like a lot of people I find don't move away from subjectivity and into data because they know that success will actually now be measured. I love people when I meet them like, oh, I don't really buy into this whole goal setting thing. And I'm sorry, what? Like you run a business and you have 30 staff and you don't buy into goals? I didn't even know that was possible, right? But then it's like, well, it's because I actually want more fluidity and I want that subjectivity. It's like, well, if you're running around with your head cut off, I could tell you why, right? And I think that so many people are fearful. I think they are fearful of having data measured because it actually will also show if you have a high ego as an owner, which we all know a lot of owners get stuck with high egos, unhealthy egos. What happens is that data will prove you wrong over and over and over and over again. It'll prove who's right around a decision or around a mentality. And so I always say, like, you actually have to really work on yourself to realize that you want to be a collaborator before you can commit to bringing data into your business. Because I found that that is something that holds you back from being open to letting data tell the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Casey, I totally agree. The psychology of fear is something that I think about quite a lot. And the ego will tell us, anybody in any walk of life, that a quantitative failure is a bad thing. Your ego, that little cushy padded cell in your head, is going to say, oh, this is danger, danger, this is bad. But the reality is that is the only way that we grow, right? If you only live within your subjective, instinctive cadence of marching forward, that is all you will ever be, and that is all you will ever have. And I would like to circle back to one thing you said at the onset of the fear point, which is that, I want more fluidity. I want more subjectivity. I want more of a team collaborative model. That's awesome. We call that collectivism. Put something in a quantitative way out there, right? A set of operating expectations and a long-term vision, and then get feedback from the smart folk that you have employed so that you can push each other forward. That's what fluidity and collectivism and collaboration actually is. Collaboration isn't groupthink. Collaboration isn't sitting around just telling each other, regardless of how you do, that you did a great job. That's the opposite.
Are you getting the advice you need for your business from this episode? Do you want to get more than just one question answered and have it customized to you and your business? Well, Cultivate Advisors works one-on-one with thousands of business owners every day. Let them help you scale your business today. Don't just listen to this episode. Take action and go to cultivateadvisors.com to see which advisor you get matched with and receive a free 2-hour business assessment on how you could scale your business to the next level. Act now at cultivateadvisors.com.
For the listeners that are joining us, really ask yourself this question. Have you created a culture of openness and understanding of measuring data in success? And are you open to connecting data throughout the business before any decision is made? And that it's more of a prove it mentality. Yes, we will try something, test it, measure it, prove it. If you're right, we can invest all day in the direction of that for the organization. And I think once you commit to that, this business scaling becomes way easier, actually, right? I mean, we're on like the fundamental pedestal that you have to build the foundation. I mean, this is the conversation we're having, Alex, is like laying concrete blocks in the basement right now to build the house on top. If this culture and this mentality doesn't exist, it's like you said, communication and scale doesn't happen. So I think we've beat that up. I want to go a little step deeper before we talk about maybe ways to do this. Like I personally have always struggled with this feeling of just like, how far do you go to get data accuracy? I've just continually found that to show up consistently and just, unrealistic expectations of when folks get started bringing data into their business, of how they view the accuracy. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you see that with your clients? I mean, I know you're a data junkie with your clients, but I'm just curious if you have any perspective on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And being trained as I am, one of my fields of study, in addition to economics, was statistics. And statistical theory, you will learn in any statistics 1 class about something called error term. The error term on statistics and statistical analysis is almost never zero. You're almost never going to get a 100% accurate account or analysis. But
and small business owners probably are never even at like 15%.
Yeah, right. But I'll tell you what.
Right, it's probably pretty error.
Right. But in a lot of folks who are averse to, quantitative and data-oriented conversation will take that, say, oh, we can't ever get accurate, and designate, oh, this is just an exercise in futility. It's not worth pursuing at all. But that's not true. Like the pursuit of anything, we as business owners or martial arts or athletes or whatever, you're chasing perfection, knowing that you'll never get there. And that's the beauty of it. There's this constant climb and strive for tightening down the protocols and tightening down the analysis. So when you first do this exercise, you have to know that it's going to be wrong. And that's okay. And then the next time we do it, we're going to cut that error down. And then the next time we do it, we're going to cut that error down again. And once you go through a few cycles of that, boy, you start to get a good model. You start to get a pretty good grip on it. And we account for those error terms. We say, all right, well, for example, financial model, we can guess that we're going to be in this realm. Here's our max feasible. Here's our least feasible. And here's the most likely middle ground. And we plan for those ranges.
What I love about this conversation is you brought up perfection. So I'll throw out the perfectionism takes over, right? Like owners get stuck at scale because they need it to be perfect before they roll out. They don't realize you've got to jump out of the plane, optimize 3 or 4 times, throw the chute open a few times, and you will continue to create that scale. Data is the exact same way, right? Data is the exact same way. That's what you're describing. You're going to come out and know that you'll probably be wrong by 25%, but you'll know why you were wrong for 10 to 15% of that. And the next year, you will be 92% accurate. And what you're doing, the word that hasn't been thrown out yet that I constantly see people struggle with is predictability. The value of that word in a business is unbelievably, right? Like you brought up, a lot of what we do is enterprise value creation. We grow businesses and make them worth more, healthier businesses, right? One of the ways we're doing that is using data to create predictability. Predictability that is hit at a higher success rate is worth more in the market when you go sell your business, right? You don't have to overcomplicate it, right? The word predictability is huge. So if you don't ever start with data and accept that you're at a 75%, of predictability accuracy, that's worth more than not having it at all. And that would just be the lesson to share, to piggyback on what you said. For the perfectionists that are coming in as owners, like, I can't get there, so it just feels like a lost cause. Like, no. 75% of predictability is better than 0 because you're not doing it. And that is worth immense more. And 75% easier to communicate. It's 75% better decision making. All of that trickles down. And that's what I think what your message is today when we talk about why is data so important. I don't know. Do you buy into that just perspective of predictability?
No doubt. Perspective of predictability. And, that goes into the enterprise value. That goes into the exit conversation, right? The hypothetical that I like to ask people is, how would you pitch your business right now if you were going to try to sell it to somebody? And a lot of them are like, they just do what I do forever. And if you replicate me, we're good. But I have no idea how to do that. Normally that's kind of how that goes in, right? And understanding that if you don't have any degree of predictability, or more importantly and more profoundly, if your only predictability is subjective, right? If your predictability is some mystified, intuitive conclusion that you've come to, you might be dead on, but that's not value in the marketplace, and that's objective fact. And one other point I'd like to make, Casey, which is a sub point, is data isn't scripture. Right, to your point, 75% accuracy. You're not going to bet the entire farm on that the first time. You're going to reiterate this a whole bunch of times. And then eventually, when you sharpen that axe enough, then you're good to bet the farm on it. But this is a process. This is a skill.
Well, for everybody listening in, right, what we're really saying is it's probably going to take you 3 or 4 years to learn how to trend and predict using data. So don't get frustrated. I think a lot of people get started, they get frustrated. That's why we're bringing it up, right, Alex? It's just we constantly see that unfold. We're finally the ones that get a hold of it and go, stop it. Like, let us track it. We'll evolve it. We'll optimize it. And boom, our predictability skyrockets. That makes the business scale 2, 3, 4 times faster. That's how we create growth. That's how we create a faster lift. So just keep that in mind. I want to move for purpose of time. I want to start to get this really tangible for everybody listening in. You do this every day now, Alex. When you sit down with a business owner, what are the 2 or 3 or 4 kind of just outcomes or steps that you would encourage people to kind of take on a macro level, right? To get into bed with data, right? Like what would be your flow to give them a system of like ways to think about how to get started? What comes to mind when I share that with you?
The disclaimer, as folks who are listening probably know, we work with an infinite number of industries, right? People who produce all sorts of different things. The mental model of broad quantification, a prerequisite to that is, what do you produce? What does your company do? What is, if you're a service-based company, what are the verticals? What are the products or services that you offer? What does an hour mean in your billable hours model? What does a unit of production mean in your widget model? And more,
how detailed can you get around your product or service?
And
step 1.
What are the inputs and the outputs on it, right? So what does it cost? Materials, time, error, logistics, shipping, etc. And then what does that get in the marketplace? What can that get in the marketplace? What have we tried on pricing structure, right? If we really want to get into the minutia, but you ask what questions I ask at the beginning is, how tight can we get quantifying whatever widget it is that you produce?
A really easy way that I've learned, Alex, how to do that is also give yourself permission to get out a whiteboard or get out a shared collaborative document, and on a Google Sheet, Excel, whatever you want, query, wherever you want to go, and keep digging. Just keep dividing it down. Keep trying to go down to the smallest widget of all those inputs and outputs. Even if you think it's not going to be relative, you will then get all the data surrounding your product or service, and you can then pick what do you see and go, oh, that seems very measurable. That seems like what I can watch. But if you don't give yourself permission just to explore the data, you'll never identify what are truly the areas you want to keep watching. All right, step number 1, get your service and product defined, communicated, and clear from inputs and outputs. Step 1. What's step 2?
So we figured out point A, step 1. Step 2 is figuring out point B. How can we, as tightly as possible, define the destination? The destination might be a top-line revenue figure. It might be a number of markets. It might be a number of products produced. It might be a head count. It might be a number of hours worked for the owner, or any combination of any of these variables, right? But if we only think of our destination in terms of broad concepts, it's really hard to craft a plan to specifically get there. I would rather hear, I want to go to Chicago, West Side, this address, versus I want to go somewhere in the Midwest, and hope that there's some water around, right? Specificity allows us to craft the route where we are going. And it's different. That's honestly where I spend most of my time in my early meetings with clients, prospects, business owners, is getting as tight as possible, right? Not completely objective, but as tight as possible around that vision.
Thanks for tuning in to Catapult Your Business, where Cultivate Advisors is helping you catapult your business one question at a time. Are you running your business, or is your business running you? At Cultivate Advisors, they'll match you with an expert advisor and do a free 2-hour deep dive for your business. This will give you the clarity you need on how to get your business to the next level. Cultivate has worked with thousands of businesses. What do you have to lose? So head over to cultivateadvisors.com and sign up for your free 2-hour session.
So step 2 is essentially identify the destination. And I the example I always give Alex too is like, think everybody always talks about current value of money versus future value of money. They're different.
They sure are.
Right? You've got to slow down to where you're at currently on the data set. And then you've got to run your future data set. Because then what is there? There's a bridge, right? I'm assuming it's where you're going on number 3. But then there's a bridge that actually allows you to problem solve, right? That's step 3. It allows you to start to solve essentially what are all those sub levers? What are all those sub elements between the data where you're currently at versus what you need the data to be where you're trying to go? It breaks down, and if you keep digging, you'll identify, okay, this is the route I need to move to get this data to move from here to here, which is what makes the business more scalable.
Bridging the gap, but most importantly, like it is the relatively easy to figure out the straightest line, right? If you say, I'm at 1 of something and I want to get to 10 of something and I have 10 years to get there and I'm going to increase by 1 each time, right? You can arbitrarily craft a linear model. The most important thing is, how do you have contingencies in there, right? Back in the day, we used to have to print out map quests for destinations, right? And it would tell us one route, the fastest route to get there. But if a road's closed, you're lost. You have no idea where you are. You got to go to a gas station, get a map. And so being able to say, all right, here's the fastest route, but what's going to happen? What market restrictions are we going to have to deal with? What happens if we have attrition? What happens with seasonality or, broader economic factors, what have you? How are you going to evaluate and plan ahead for contingencies, bumps in the road, diversions from that straight line? And that's quantitative analysis too, albeit more speculative quantitative analysis and data.
So obviously we know, Alex, we do this every day as advisors, right? We're always pulling in data. So one of the easiest ways to get started is, shameless plug, hire Cultivate, let an advisor look at your business and break down all the data. Always easier on a third-party perspective. But that may not be the route for everybody, and that's okay. But the reality is get started by taking your product or service, explore data all around it, and identify the inputs and the outputs and communicate it and start to track it. Then go take that same set and place it in the future and reset what you want that destination to look like, the size, the scope, again, all the different versions, all different types of businesses, and then start to problem solve and run initiatives based on the gap in between those two elements. And people are listening are probably going, guys, this isn't that hard. Like what I'm hearing you say is you literally want me to say, where am I at and where do I want to go and what do I need to do? Yeah, that's literally what we're saying. It's just go weigh what you think you could go to in terms of detail of data, then go 3 or 4 times deeper to understand the minuscule, because that's where I think people get stuck is they stay at the surface.
And broad subjective concepts are the antithesis of what we're talking about, right? So once you've gotten the broad concept of step 1, step 2, step 3, then ask, how much of it can I tie to numbers, right? Ask how much, how fast, and how bad can this go? Those are like the 3 things that I encourage people to do. Cultivate what I do, what you do, what we do, that we can skip some steps and do this analysis faster. But what I encourage everybody to do is put their skeptics pants on. If you had like the worst day ever at work every day for the next month, what would happen in your business? Where would you be? What would you do about it? What are your emergency contingencies? Okay. What if we just had a week-long bad stretch? What if, all sorts of things can go wrong. I'm not going to belabor, but you get my point. Pull this apart more than you ever would subjectively. This isn't a story you have to tell yourself. This is a story you have to tell your employees, your business partners, your future customers, potential future strategic investment, exit, whatever you're doing. You have to make sure that this passes their skepticism test. And you can't do that with subjectivity. You have to do that with data. Here's how this will affect us. Here's how long it will last. Here's what happens if we get an influx in capital, an influx in customers. Here's what, upward and downward, what do we do in contingency fashion?
Makes a lot of sense. And I hope people jumping in or listening in are hearing this loud and clear that subjective is still important. It's just so is data, right? Like it's not this or that. It's both. They're both equally as important because you have to use subjectivity, like you said, to have that criticism or that skepticism essentially to put together a plan to go contingency. So if you don't have that qualitative sense, that qualitative sense, it's impossibly quantitative based. So just keep that in mind if you're going through this. This might be kind of fun as a way to wrap up here, Alex. Thanks for joining. Thanks for giving all the details. But I'm just curious, what are some of your all-time favorite data metrics? If you were just to think of 2 or 3 that you love when you meet a business owner, I love to know these 2 or 3 things. I feel like I can tell a story of almost any business when I understand these 2 or 3, and I'll share my favorite 2 or 3, but I'm just curious if you have a few, these are some of my favorite data metrics to dig into in a business.
I'm big into personnel. I think I am fascinated by the recruiting, interview, hire, and train process, especially for scaling businesses. And one of the questions I ask is, what are your day one performance expectations for a new employee? Right? If you were going to hire me today as an employee, what would you tell me I got to do at work next Monday to do a good job? And that usually, number one, the time delay on the answer, and then the how thorough that answer is tells me a lot about what's going on in the business and how scalable it is or isn't already, right? Somebody who's got that answer fully cooked is primed for scale because they've done the analysis to get to figures and they've figured out how to communicate it, and they've probably developed some material around it. There's a process. It's not just show up on day one, follow me around, and hope you figure it out.
Well, we know a lot of business owners struggle to duplicate themselves and bring on staff and get them at the same skill level of their ability. So, you just hit on probably one of the biggest roots that most business owners struggle with. If I were to throw in one or two, I think my 2 favorite data points right now that I love digging into, first is cost of acquisition. How much does it take to acquire a customer? What does that take? What is the output of dollars to get a cost of acquisition? I think most business owners are completely wrong on how much that is, and they don't realize how much they actually do need to spend to acquire and be able to control, a client engine, and then or customer engine, depending on the type of business. And then my second one that I'm obsessed with right now, Alex, is actually digging into the hiring based on capacity, right? So the analysis of going, when do I need to bring another body in based on capacity? So I actually understand the speed of scale so I don't wreck my financials. Those are my 2. I feel like you have those 2 really dialed in, you're also going to be poised for extremely fast growth. Alex, I wanted to ask that question just to show everybody there's a ton of different data sets to get into. The key is pick a couple that you love to get started with and dig in, and it'll most likely give you a brighter future in your business. We're running out of time here, Alex. I want to come to you with, kind of some final thoughts. So I'm coming to you here in just a moment for that. But for everybody listening in, you want to geek out on data with Alex? Jump to our website. Check us out at cultivateadvisors.com. Submit a form. Let us know you want to chat. And feel free to throw in the notes. Hey, I want to meet with, data guru Alex, and we'll get you connected with Alex and give you a couple free hours with him to unravel the business a little further. So, but Alex, back to you as we close up. Any final words of wisdom you'd like to share with all of our entrepreneurial listeners coming in?
I would share a very cliche stoic mindset, and it's around the error term in data. Chase being wrong. The obstruction is the way, right? If you're wrong enough times in your prediction and analysis, it will facilitate growth. You will recut, you will retarget, you will run faster and better and smarter. Chase that. Go find your errors. Don't let them come to you because they're going to hurt way worse if they come to you and tell you when they're present than if you go find those errors.
Alex, extremely well said. Amazing wisdom as always. Thank you for everything you give to the clients and supporting Cultivate in this journey of entrepreneurs to make the world better. For all of our entrepreneurs listening in, thanks for joining us at Catapult Your Business. We'll see you next week.